Welcome to another deep dive. Because, when you hire a contractor to remodel your kitchen, you really don't expect them to sneak down into the basement and start quietly dynamiting the foundation of your house.
Yeah, that would be a pretty terrible surprise.
Right. But today, we are looking at this massive 800-page legal document that promises to basically update the plumbing of family law in Ukraine. But, well, it might actually be planting explosives in the basement of the family home.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Yeah, we are unpacking a passionate, highly consequential critique of draft law number 14394, which is the proposed new civil code of Ukraine. And our guide through this whole labyrinth is Dr. Viacheslav Morgun.
Right, he's a specialist in municipal law and economics.
Exactly. And his thesis is just staggering. He argues that this draft is essentially a Trojan horse. Like, it fundamentally threatens the autonomy of the family itself, all under the guise of European standards.
It is crucial to mention right up front, though, that Dr. Morgan's critique is highly charged. I mean, he makes some direct, heavy-hitting comparisons to authoritarianism and Russian state practices.
Right, the stakes are high.
Very high. So as always, our job here isn't to take a political side or to endorse these claims. We're just here to impartially analyze the institutional mechanics he's warning about.
Keep it neutral. Just look at the machinery.
Exactly. And Morgan's overarching argument here is that the state is attempting this massive biopolitical takeover of the household.
Okay, let's pause on that term, because biopolitical takeover sounds like something straight out of a dystopian sci-fi novel. What does that actually mean in the context of, a boring civil code?
So in political science, biopolitics refers to how a state manages human life as basically an administrative resource.
Like tracking statistics.
More invasive than that, it is the shift from governing territory, like land and borders, to governing biology. So reproduction, family structures, child rearing.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Morgan argues that if you strip away all the dense legal jargon from this 800-page draft, you find a framework designed to systematically penetrate the private sphere.
So the state is rewriting the rules so it can just, walk into your bedroom, your kitchen?
Pretty much. Your child's nursery, too. It's about assuming monopoly control over family life and completely stripping the family of its special protective status.
So the family isn't a separate protected thing anymore.
No, under this draft, relationships between parents and children are cynically reduced to just ordinary property disputes.
That is wild. If the state is quietly trying to manage citizens like livestock, we really need to look at the specific mechanisms they're using to do it.
We do. And there's one that really stands out.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. The source material points to Draft Article 1478.
Yeah, this is the one.
According to Morgan, this specific clause would allow a 14-year-old to marry in the event of pregnancy, provided there is a court decision.
Which is just jarring to read.
But hold on, though. The source explicitly mentions that after a massive public outcry, the authors of this draft law backed down. They promised to remove this specific norm.
They did promise that, yeah.
So if it's getting pulled from the final draft, aren't we just chasing ghosts here? Like, why is Morgan making this a centerpiece of his critique?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Morgan argues the ghost is still haunting the machine, so to speak.
What do you mean?
The very fact that this clause was drafted, formalized, and submitted by legal professionals in the first place, it reveals the document's dark underlying philosophy.
So it shows their hand.
Exactly. To understand why it's so dangerous, we have to look at how different branches of law collide here. Think about it. A pregnancy at 14 years old is biologically and legally the result of a severe crime.
Right.
Under Article 155 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, sexual intercourse with a person under 16 is a serious felony. It carries a mandatory prison sentence.
So the pregnancy is literal biological evidence that a statutory rape has occurred.
Which means this proposed civil code was designed to create a direct conflict with the criminal code.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going.
Yeah. What would Article 1478 actually do in a real-world courtroom? Morgan introduces this concept of regulatory capture.
Regulatory capture.
Right. This is a phenomenon where a regulatory or legal system is co-opted to serve the interests of the very predators it is supposed to be policing.
That is terrifying. So if a 14-year-old can be legally married off due to pregnancy,
the perpetrator of that felony can simply hire a civil lawyer, petition a family court judge, and literally marry their victim.
so the criminal uses the new civil code as a shield. They use it to bypass the criminal prosecutor entirely.
Yes.
The perpetrator makes the victor their legal wife, and the statutory rape case just evaporates because the state just sanctioned the relationship.
The state provides a legal sluice to just watch away the crime. The judge, who is supposed to be the ultimate arbiter of justice, is transformed into an administrative accomplice.
An accomplice who helps legalize pedophilia.
Basically, yeah. The justice system is captured and weaponized against the victim. It forces them into a legally binding contract with their abuser.
That is incredibly bleak. And Morgan draws a geopolitical parallel here that makes this even more chilling, doesn't he?
He does. He compares this specific legal mechanism to neo-feudal practices in regions of the Russian Federation.
Specifically pointing to the North Caucasus and Chechnya, right?
Exactly. He notes that local elites in those regions have spent years using identical legal loopholes to formalize the abduction and assault of minors.
So adult men take 14-year-old girls as wives, and compliant local courts just rubber stamp the permits.
Right, citing exceptional circumstances, the child essentially becomes a state-sanctioned trophy.
So Morgan's point is that the Ukrainian lawmakers who tried to quietly slip this mechanism into a massive modernization bill, they revealed a deeply predatory approach to the most vulnerable members of society.
Yes. It proves that the foundation of the law is fundamentally compromised, even if they delete that one paragraph.
Man, if a law provides a literal shield for a predator, I shudder to think what it does to a normal parent just trying to raise a teenager.
Oh, it completely changes the game for them, too.
Because this draft law doesn't just impact the extremes of the justice system, it fundamentally alters everyday household dynamics.
Completely. Morgan argues this destroys the concept of the family as a fortress.
It turns the family home into a transparent glass aquarium where the state is constantly watching.
And where children are given unprecedented rights to independently sue their own parents in court.
I really want to ground this in reality for you, the listener. Let's say I'm a parent. My 14-year-old is hanging out with a dangerous crowd or failing their classes.
A pretty normal teenage scenario.
Right, so I take away their smartphone at night, or I enforce a strict 10 p.m. curfew. Could a lawyer actually frame my basic parenting as psychological violence or a violation of personal space under this new code?
According to Morgan's analysis of the draft's language, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're kidding.
No, the definitions of psychological violence and personal boundaries in these drafts are notoriously broad. They are highly subjective.
So it engineers a very specific mechanic of fear.
Yes. It creates a presumption of guilt for parents. Everyday discipline is instantly transformed into a massive legal liability.
So if you set a firm boundary, you risk a lawsuit initiated by your own child.
Backed by state-appointed advocates.
Yeah.
Or you get a sudden, unannounced visit from juvenile police.
Parenting basically becomes an exercise in risk management. You are constantly walking through a legal minefield in your own living room.
And let's look at the behavioral economics of that environment. What is the most rational strategy for a parent trapped in a system like that?
Where their every move, every argument, and every disciplinary action is monitored and legally actionable.
Right, the rational response is emotional detachment.
Wow, they just pull back.
Parents become terrified to say the wrong thing or enforce necessary rules, so they retreat. They become silent, passive providers of food and shelter.
They withdraw from the active, messy work of actually raising their child just to protect themselves from state repression.
Exactly. Which leads to what Morgan calls demographic suicide.
Demographic suicide. Because if young people watch their parents navigate this intense anxiety, if they see that becoming a parent means you are instantly treated as a guilty suspect by the state, they will consciously refuse to have children.
The legal and financial risks of starting a family simply become way too high.
And when parents emotionally detach out of fear, it creates a psychological vacuum in the life of the child.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Right. So when the family fortress is dismantled and parents are forced to step back, the state aggressively steps in to fill that void.
And this is where Morgan points to Putin's Russia as the ultimate cautionary tale of this exact mechanism.
Oh, so?
There, the state assumes a near-total monopoly on shaping the child's worldview.
Yeah, the source mentions specific ideological programs in Russia to illustrate this, like the mandatory conversations about important things in schools.
And the youth militarization movement, the UNARMIA.
So the state replaces organic parental guidance with aggressive, standardized propaganda. But it goes even further than just brainwashing, doesn't it?
It does. The threat of child protection services is actively weaponized to crush dissent. Children literally become hostages of the punitive system.
Hostages.
Yeah. In Russia, if a parent is a journalist, a public activist, or simply someone who attends an unsanctioned protest, the state doesn't need to debate them.
They don't even need to arrest them on political charges.
Right. They simply deploy the juvenile system, they threaten to declare the parents unfit, and place the children in state orphanages.
It is the ultimate leverage. You silence the political opposition by threatening their kids.
Exactly.
Which brings up the obvious question, I think. If this system of extreme surveillance is so destructive, if it ruins the family dynamic, causes demographic decline, and terrifies parents who actually benefits from setting it up this way,
It's a great question.
why build this glass aquarium in Ukraine at all?
You have to follow the money and the power. Morgan introduces a concept he calls the juvenile racket.
The juvenile racket.
Yeah. This entire legal architecture doesn't exist to protect children. It exists to create a massive, shadowy market for bureaucrats, inspectors, and social services.
It establishes an extortion economy.
Precisely.
It's like a traffic cop ignoring a stolen car, speeding through a red light because the driver might be armed and dangerous, and instead writing a ticket to a parked minivan for having a slightly expired meter.
That is a brilliant analogy.
They go for the easy-paying target.
Yes, and it perfectly describes the disparity in how Morgan says this enforcement actually plays out. If the goal were genuinely child protection, social services would focus all their resources on the most severe cases of abuse.
Right, the real emergencies.
But in a corrupt rent-seeking system, bureaucrats will systematically ignore horrific, actual violence in highly marginalized families.
Like those dealing with severe addiction or deep systemic poverty.
Because there is no money to be extracted from a family that has nothing. You can't squeeze a bribe out of someone who can barely feed themselves.
That is so dark. The system deliberately turns a blind eye to real danger.
And instead, the bureaucratic machine meticulously targets financially stable, perfectly normal middle-class families.
They go after the family with a nice house, steady jobs, and a reputation to protect. They target the people who have something to lose.
Exactly. The inspectors will fabricate an issue or inflate a minor incident.
Give me an example of how that works.
Okay, so a child gets a bruised knee at the playground. Or a teenager complains to a school counselor about the stress of homework.
Normal kid stuff.
Totally normal. But the bureaucrats will use that tiny pretext to threaten to open a formal court case, or even threaten to physically remove the child.
Just to scare them.
Yes. The entire purpose of this administrative terror is to maximize their corrupt rent. They hold the child hostage to extract a bribe.
Or what Morgan implies is essentially a corruption subscription, just to keep your
A
kids.
corruption subscription, yeah.
It is institutional extortion dressed up as social work.
It really is.
So you can't just delete this 800-page draft code and call it a day if the underlying system still views the family as a resource to be mined.
No, the rot goes much deeper than one document.
If the whole architecture treats every family as a suspicious object, how do you actually fix it? What is Dr. Morgan's solution to protect the family from this kind of state overreach?
Morgan proposes a massive paradigm shift, an entirely new institutional architecture.
Okay, lay it out for us.
He argues that strategic protection of the family is only possible through a fundamental change in the geometry of power. He calls for transitioning the territorial community to a model known as the single legal entity of public law-economic subject.
Whoa, right.
The acronym in Ukrainian is A, or SLEPLES in English.
Let me stop you right there. Single legal entity of public law-economic subject. We need to translate that dense academic jargon into real-world terms.
Fair enough.
So what does this all mean? How does this actually function on my street for you, the listener?
To put it in practical terms, it means completely abolishing the punitive, tap-down juvenile justice system.
Get rid of it entirely.
Yes. You strip the power away from distant, corrupt state bureaucrats, and you decentralize it down to the hyper-local level.
To the neighborhood level.
Exactly, to what he calls bodies of self-organization of population, or OSNs.
So we are talking about deeply empowered neighborhood councils.
It creates an organic, local ecosystem. Under this model, if a family is genuinely struggling, the response isn't a cold state inspector showing up with a clipboard.
Ready to check the contents of your fridge and threaten to take your kids.
Right. The response is localized solidarity.
The intervention comes from your actual neighbors, or local school teachers, or a familiar community leader who actually lives on your street.
Because they are the ones who see the situation every day. They bear a personal, moral responsibility for their community.
And they can actually help.
Exactly. The community provides tangible help. If the parents lost their jobs, the local ecosystem helps them find work.
If they need financial aid or volunteer support for childcare, the community provides it.
Yes, the entire system shifts from a logic of punishment and removal to a logic of preventive support and keeping the family together.
I understand the theory of neighbors helping neighbors, but how does this actually stop the state? I really want to push on the mechanics here.
Sure.
Let's say the state passes a terrible law anyway, and a federal inspector or a state police officer shows up to a house in one of these neighborhoods. How does a local council physically or legally stop a state agent with a badge?
That is the most critical part of Morgan's design. How do you stop the state from just steamrolling the local community?
Right.
His answer is a legal mechanism called social validation, or the V model.
V model.
V stands for veto.
A community veto over state power. How does that work legally?
Under the SLEPLES model, the local territorial community acts as a sovereign, legal, and economic entity. This means state funding and administrative mandates for social services on that specific territory must be routed through the community's legal framework.
How interesting. So no external inspector, social worker, or juvenile police officer has any operational jurisdiction without the explicit ongoing consent of the community.
Exactly.
It's like a corporate structure. The local neighborhood is the board of directors, and the state inspector is just an outside contractor.
Yes. And if that contractor steps out of line, they get fired.
Wow.
If state social workers show up and display any sign of corruption, unprofessionalism, or overreach, the local community, through their OSN, has an absolute immediate veto.
They can just shut them down.
They can legally block the inspector's work, revoke their local jurisdiction, and cut off their funding on that specific territory.
The state agent literally loses their legal standing the moment they cross the neighborhood line without consent.
Yes, that's the mechanism.
That completely flips the power dynamic. The ordinary citizen goes from being a silent, terrified victim of a massive bureaucratic machine to being a controlling shareholder of their own community.
The community dictates terms to the state, not the other way around.
Because true protection of the family requires building an impenetrable institutional shield around it, governed by the community itself.
The citizen reclaims sovereignty over their own backyard.
This deep dive started as a look into a dry 800-page critique of Ukraine's draft law number 14394. But clearly, this is a profound exploration of the friction between state overreach and family privacy.
It really is.
It reveals how laws, even those wrapped in the shiny, progressive packaging of European standards, can be engineered to legalize corruption, to shatter the autonomy of the home, and fundamentally alter how a society raises its next generation.
And that is exactly why this matters to you, the listener, no matter what country or jurisdiction you live in.
Right. It's a universal warning.
It challenges us to look closely at the legal architecture being built around us. When a government loudly announces that it is stepping in to modernize the family or protect children, we have to ask the hard mechanical questions.
What rights are we inadvertently surrendering?
Who's actually holding the clipboard?
And are we funding a system of genuine support or a system of inescapable surveillance? You always have to read the fine print, especially when the state is offering to remodel your house.
Very true.
But before we go, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Dr. Morgan's solution relies heavily on the idea of the local community protecting its own through these neighborhood ecosystems and absolute veto powers.
Right, the V model.
It sounds wonderfully organic, but if the state entirely removes itself from family regulation and hands all that power to the immediate neighborhood, what happens to the family whose lifestyle, religion, or deeply held beliefs simply don't match the specific cultural or moral norms of their neighbors?
Yeah, that is the inherent danger of hyperlocalism. It invites the tyranny of the majority.
Exactly. If the neighborhood holds all the power, and they collectively decide they don't like how you live or how you raise your kids, who protects you from your neighbors?
It's a really tough question.
It's a question of whether we are just swapping one kind of surveillance for another. Because whether it's a distant state bureaucrat or the president of the local neighborhood council, once the foundation of your autonomy is cracked, the whole fortress comes down. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the fine print in the world around you, and we'll see you next time.